All right. Hey, folks. Let's talk about this essay. I'll have this document for you to read, but I also thought it might be helpful for me to just kind of talk through this. But here we are. Here is the essay. I am going to show you some options, as is kind of indicated by the top of our document here. So let's get to it. We'll start with sort of the general option. For this essay, take a look at one empire, two tools. All right. So you will identify one empire that you've been doing. Perhaps you've already identified this empire in your source integration activity. And you'll explore two tools of empire. Okay. And you will frame your thesis around this question. So I provide you the question. I show you sort of a template that you could use. You can also modify it as I indicate with the note. So here we go. Question. What are the two most important tools of empire for the supply, whatever you're doing, for the Inca Empire, for instance? A template thesis could be diplomacy and administration were the two most important tools of empire. For the Inca Empire, since they most effectively built and established power. You could also just say for the Incas, I guess, if you don't really want to repeat the word empire, although it is an important word. You don't need to keep repeating it. Okay, please feel free to adapt the template. Okay, within reason. Okay, you need to identify the tools. You need to indicate which empire you're looking at, but you do have some ability to play with this. So in particular, you might choose to adapt the reasons why you chose these tools. And I have just set the reasons up around our definitions of tool of empire, which is strategies that effectively build or establish power. But you may choose to sort of measure the effectiveness in other ways, right? So you might say, since they expanded and consolidated empire, right? So expansion, consolidation, building, establishing, these sorts of words. You have some flexibility there. And at the same time, I wanted to provide you with some sort of starting point template, which ultimately you could use. Okay, a modified option. So maybe you're feeling a little overwhelmed. Maybe you feel like you would benefit from scaling back a bit. One, don't feel bad about that. Things have been busy. Things have been tough. They're tough already. And now I know a number of you are into sports, club activities, especially those that have some sort of interscholastic competitions attached. Things are heating up here, so I do not think any less of any individual who thinks that they would benefit from a modified option. All right, it's not a reflection of you; it's a reflection of where you're at. Okay, so embrace that. So with that said, maybe you feel like you need to scale this back a bit. So rather than doing two tools, you would, I'm glad I'm reading this with you. Dive into one tool of one empire. Okay, so one empire. Identify the most effective tool of empire. So one tool. So your question would be, what is the most effective tool of empire for the Incas, for the Aztecs, for the Khmer Empire, whatever it is you're doing, for the Gupta. Okay, your template. As an example, it could be administration was the most effective tool of empire for the Inca Empire, since it most effectively built and established power. Okay. Again, see note above. You can play with that idea. I think especially the reasons in which you are identifying it, right? Feel free to be nuanced. Okay. Extended learning options. So we kind of looked at the general option. We looked at the modified option. Some of you are maybe all in. You're either into this one way or another. You're interested in either the topic or in writing a more complex expository essay. Maybe you just have more time, So your extended learning options here are various. So One, you could do what's the general option, but rather than doing one empire and 2 tools, you could do one empire and 3 tools. So you would be effectively adding a third body paragraph to your essay. So rather than this structure, which would be a 4-paragraph structure, you would be doing a 5-paragraph structure. All right, that's one way to sort of extend the paper. Another thing you might do, and actually this is what historically I have done with this essay, is it's always been a comparative essay. Based on sort of limited time that we have, we didn't really have time to explore a range of case studies. Ideally, we would have looked at more than the Han and Qin in class. We would have looked at a range of empires, and then you'd have more to pull from in a comparative essay. You don't necessarily have all that now. So if you choose to do a comparative essay, it clearly would take more research on your part. That said, you might have the interest in looking at a range of case studies, which, in many respects allows you to really figure out what these most effective tools are, because you're not just looking at one, you're looking at a wider range of examples. So with a comparative essay, I would suggest 3+ case studies. All right. So you could look at the Mali, the Aztec, the Khmer, or Songhai, Gupta, Carolingians. All right. The idea here is that you are pulling 3 examples that are from different regions. All right. And I'll just go down here real quick just to remind you of our list of regions. I would suggest pulling 3 that are from different places. Okay. Doing it that way. So your question would essentially be, what are the 2 most effective tools of empire? There are ways to scale this back and increase this as well. So for instance, maybe you want to do a comparative essay, but what you really want to look at are the most effective tool, or what are the 3 most effective tools of empire. That would be the 5-star spiciness. If you wanted to do 3+ case studies and do 3 tools, that would certainly represent the most challenging version of this paper. So what are the 2 most effective tools of empire? So, I think maybe I'll just do administration and ideology. Oops, because I realized I had 2 here and then just 1 here. Okay, so we can include these as these sorts of tools: administration and belief systems, whatever, ideology, were the 2 most important tools of empire. Since they, sorry, my number was wrong here, most effectively built and established power, since we're not really referencing a certain place in this case. So with this thesis, I would suggest sort of taking out the case studies, and then, you can sort of provide a supporting statement to discuss which case studies you're looking at. All right. So clearly, this 3 tools and 3 different empire case studies represents more challenge. So there are some other things that need to be adapted. Okay. It would just be too much for a thesis for you to try to load up all of your tools and all your case studies. Ultimately, what you're interested in are the tools. So let's provide a supporting statement with which case studies you actually explore. All right, so there it is. As far as your options for this essay, this really ranges from a 3-paragraph essay to a 5-paragraph essay. You'll have an intro and a conclusion, and then if you're doing 1 tool, that would be your 3rd paragraph. If you're doing 2 tools, that would be your 4th paragraph, and then 3 tools would bring you to the 5-paragraph model. All right, so 3 to 5 paragraphs. Really, you need to stick with the paragraph model and not just go off board and create 8 paragraphs for 2 tools, which I've seen before. You got to stick to the structure. There will be some creative opportunities within the essay, though that's not part of that. Sources. Let's shift gears a bit. I ask that you include 3+ sources for your paper. If you have done the Han or the Qin Dynasty, the textbook, while hopefully helpful, is not going to be one of the sources. You may use, and I encourage you to use, the worldhistory.edu source that you did for the integrating source material activity. I am also requiring that you use one source from a SAS database. And I have this tutorial here. You'll see. So go through this. It shows you how to access the databases, which ones I think are helpful, how they're a little bit different. So use at least one of these. Okay. Your bib will be in Chicago style format. We've been practicing that. You may access Wikipedia, but do not cite it. I don't completely disparage Wikipedia, okay? It's more like you find information there that is kind of compelling, and then you see if there is a footnote or an endnote in that case, and you can click on the endnote, you go down, or you can just scroll down to the bottom of the page, and it'll show you where that source comes from. Try to find that source, all right? And actually, with the SAS databases, it has a lot of these articles and monographs and sources that you might not be able to find in a general Google search. Okay, so Wikipedia, not completely bad. I think it has good information, but you just need to follow up and figure out where that Wikipedia author got that information and track down that source. Okay. Okay. You need to footnote any words, ideas, or research that are not your own. Okay. Come on, Adam. What's wrong with you? Okay. And this includes paraphrases and summaries, right? Integrating source material activity. Just because it doesn't have these quotation marks around the text doesn't mean you have ownership over it. Okay. If you paraphrase it or summarize someone else's ideas, you need to cite that as well with a footnote and a bib entry. Final note on source material, all right? You got to make sure that your sub-argument paragraphs, these general body paragraphs that talk about your tools, have multiple sources within them. If you're just using one source, you're essentially just summarizing someone else's idea. The idea is to take multiple sources and synthesize that information in a way that supports your claim, right? So in order to do that, you need to have at least 2 different sources that you are citing within those paragraphs. I ask that you have 3+ sources. Okay, so yes, you can totally repeat a source in another body paragraph from the same person. That's fine. Like the World History Encyclopedia or some other source, maybe you're getting a really awesome article from JSTOR, one of the suggested databases on this tutorial that I have up here. But you need to make sure that it's not all one source in one paragraph. You got to divide it up a bit, okay? You're not just summarizing someone else's ideas. You are creating your own claim and using their supporting evidence for your claim, all right? You're just not summarizing someone else's claim. All right. There we have it. Structure the essay. Again, what you might be seeing next here, I don't mean it to be overwhelming. What I'm trying to do is provide a stronger structure as a starting point. And, I don't do this, I think I note this here, to sort of crush your creativity. I'm doing it just to provide clarity, okay? And if you felt like you wanted to articulate something or restructure something, I am all about listening to your thoughts here and adapting as you think is appropriate. I just don't want to see that you've adapted something without any communication. As I'm reading it, I'm maybe a little confused. And then I would sort of dock points, right? Because I don't understand your thinking. So let me know your thinking. Okay, I'm going to talk about a hook more. And, one of the things that one of the real learning targets for this assignment is integrating and citing source material. Another learning target is hook writing. And this is a great opportunity to sort of flex some of your more creative muscles. I am going to be putting together a screencast on hook writing, specifically aligned with the Empire paper. And I'm going to ask you to try to write a hook in view of sort of the notes that I write on this, okay? Or I show you on this. So this is forthcoming. You never really, even though it's an intro, you might be inclined to write this first, but really you should be going into sub-argument pieces. This is what you're writing first, and then you can kind of address how you want to frame it in your intro, because you already know what you're going to say, and then going down to the conclusion. So let's just break this down real quick. Your intro includes a couple different points. The hook, as I mentioned, sort of a hook. You'll have to bridge it to your thesis, all right? And that'll make more sense in the video, what this bridge actually is. But essentially, you are creating a hook to get your reader's attention, and you're going to link it to your topic of Empire, because your hook is not necessarily going to talk about Empire, all right? And then you'll kind of just provide a list of, what is the framework you're working with? These are the tools of Empire, and this is your thesis, what you've come up with. The two most effective tools of Empire for the Inca are blah, 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 or something like that. Or just follow the template above. Okay. Subargument. Your topic sentence will reference your thesis. So if I have noted administration as the first tool in my list in my thesis, your first subargument should be discussing administration. So administration effectively consolidated the Inca Empire or something like that. All right. You are putting the tool in the topic sentence. You're using the language of your thesis in your topic sentence. Again, learning targets. We are working on introducing evidence, inciting evidence. Your evidence will also provide some analyses and syntheses. So you got to make these connections clear. Nothing is obvious. The source does not speak for itself. Once you introduce the source, you need to analyze the source in view of your thesis, and then summarize syntheses of the collection of evidence that you're using. So some info here. Again, I look forward to talking through more of these things, but just providing an introduction at this point. Remember the introductory phrases. You should never start out a sentence with quotation marks. That does not work for historical expository writing. You need to introduce your evidence, and the introductions need to go first. Okay. 2 or 3 pieces per evidence, right? And I've mentioned that already. For your second subargument, if you're doing the general option, and this model is linked to the general option, it'll be adapted according to which one you're doing. But what you do for your second subargument should be just the same as your first, all right? Repeat those steps and these processes. Okay, for your conclusion, avoid moralizing. I think history papers and history writers at times might have a tendency to moralize, and the conclusion of the paper, you want to extract some life lesson, like, and this is why we need to take care of our environment or something like that. History papers should avoid that sort of moralizing. We are testing a model, really, of tools of Empire. We're not assigning value. We're seeing and trying to figure out how different empires build and establish power. Ancient empire is essentially different than modern empire. Or is it? Is it the same? All right. A lot of things have changed. We're living in sort of a post-industrial global society. Do these tools of empire that we're looking at, that list of 5, or if you've added some to it, is this relevant for a modern imperial toolkit, or is it essentially different? Are there some things that are different? So compare this idea of an ancient empire that we're doing with modern empire today. Similar, different? Again, avoid moralizing and generalizing. Provide specific examples to demonstrate your point. If you want to make a claim that the U.S. is an empire and uses different sorts of strategies, be specific with what you're using there. All right, so I've tried to be brief with this, and then finally I will have a rubric for this, but I do also want to provide a bit of a quick checklist of things that you need to make sure you have. 12-point font, double spaced. All right, clear thesis. I've provided you the question and a template. Clear essay structure. I've showed you what that looks like. All right, these all represent different paragraphs. Okay, see, paragraph 1 here, paragraph 2. It should follow this unless we've talked otherwise. Be written in the third person. All right. I am open to the idea if you wanted to develop your thesis around a first person statement or a reference to the paper, like this paper will argue that ... or something like that. Or I will suggest, or I make my argument in 3 steps or something like that, some sort of roadmap. I'm okay with the first person, but in general, you should be avoiding that first person. All right. Exception, thesis, roadmaps, if you wanted to use that. Check mechanical error, sloppy prose. I think this is my Grammarly thing up here. It's a nice thing to have if you don't have it linked to your Google Docs that you're writing on or whatever that is you're writing on. It does have a place where you can actually copy and paste your thing in. I would sort of recommend against that because I know historically there have been some problems with the formatting of footnotes in there. I'd suggest it as an attachment. But also, getting outside readers, whether that's a parent, a sibling, another teacher, maybe learning support, maybe someone else, I don't know. Formalize your language. This is my big thing, all right? The key to writing, whether it's history or whatever it is visual vocabulary, especially around verbs, all right? Avoid these prepositional or phrasal verbs. The sea people sailed around the Mediterranean, all right? The sea peoples navigated the Mediterranean, all right? Circumnavigated the Mediterranean, maybe. I don't know. Try fancy words. Avoid phrasal verbs, especially those that include a two penny word, I don't know, some cheap word, plus a preposition, right? Like the Incas put down the southern peoples, all right? You say they conquered them or something. Not put down, these sort of phrasal verbs. Lame, all right? Making sure you're doing this, introducing, interpreting, synthesizing your quotes, paraphrase, summaries, making sure you have footnotes for at least 3 sources, okay? Remember, at least 2 in each paragraph. You can repeat one, hence I have 3 here. Include a Chicago-style title page. I'll show you how to do that. And, it's hard for me to really put together a range of words for this essay because some of you will be doing 3-paragraph models, some of you will be doing 5-paragraph models or 4-paragraph models. So I am saying 700 plus words. All right. If you feel like you're being too verbose and you need to be more editorial and trim the number of words, maybe you're exceeding like 1,200 or something, maybe we need to talk. I don't know. But in general, I'm just sort of providing a floor, and you can exceed that. And I'm inclined not to mark you down if I felt you were a little too verbose. I'd let you know how you might make that shorter, but I won't knock you down for it. Okay. And again, here are our different case studies that we're looking at. All right. Posting this. I hope this is helpful. connect with me. If not, we'll also have time in class for those of you who are attending to talk about this in person or again over Zoom if you're home. All right, team. Take care.